The silent fear and the watchful neighbor. Hello, friend. Before we begin this story, I want you to just take a quiet breath for a moment. Look around you. Where are you right now? In your favorite armchair? At the kitchen table with a cup of coffee? I want you to think about this place, your place, as you listen to what I have to tell you. Because this isn't just a story about a group of neighbors. It's a story about the meaning of home, and about how the solution to one of our greatest fears might be, quite literally, right across the street. Every street, I think, has a silent fear. It lives behind the closed doors, in the houses where the lights go out a little earlier each year. It's the fear of what comes next. What happens when the simple act of climbing the stairs to bed becomes a task that requires planning? What happens when the person you shared 50 years of life with, the person who always opened the stubborn pickle jar or reminded you where you left your glasses, is no longer there? For the residents of Elm Street, that fear had a name: Maplewood Meadows, the assisted living facility on the other side of town. A nice place by all accounts. Clean, professional, with scheduled activities and a perfectly manicured lawn. And it was the last place on earth any of them wanted to go. They loved their homes. They loved the rose bushes they'd planted when the kids were small, the pencil marks on the doorframe tracking their children's growth, the worn spot on the hardwood floor where the dog used to sleep. These houses weren't just structures, they were archives of a life fully lived. But then, inevitably, something would happen. A fall, a health scare, a quiet admission to a concerned son or daughter on the phone that yes, maybe things were getting a little difficult. And then would come the gentle, loving, and dreaded suggestion: maybe we should just go take a look at Maplewood, Dad, just to see. What if the solution to aging with safety and dignity wasn't about moving to a new place, but about transforming the place you already love? This is the story of how 4 neighbors on Elm Street decided to build their own retirement village, without ever packing a single box. It all started with Arthur. Arthur lived at number 42, the brick colonial with the slightly overgrown garden. After his wife Helen passed away 2 years ago, the 3-bedroom house had begun to feel less like a home and more like an empty museum of his own life. The silence was the loudest sound he knew. His daughter Sarah, who lived 3 states away, would call every evening, her voice filled with that specific kind of loving worry that feels a lot like a gentle pressure. "Dad, are you sure you're okay all by yourself? The winters are so harsh. Maybe we should just visit Maplewood, just to have a plan B." Arthur would always refuse, his voice a little too firm. The idea of leaving the home he and Helen had poured their lives into, the garden she had so lovingly tended, it was a betrayal he couldn't stomach. But in the quiet hours after he'd hung up the phone, he felt the truth of her worry. What if he did fall? What if he had a dizzy spell? Who would know? The fear was a cold knot in his stomach. One Tuesday afternoon in October, while trying to change a light bulb in the kitchen pantry, standing on a wobbly step stool he knew Helen would have told him to throw out years ago, he slipped. He didn't break anything, thankfully. It was just a twisted ankle and a badly bruised ego. But as he sat on the cold linoleum floor, the phone on the counter just out of reach, he felt the silent fear of the entire street become a screaming reality in his own home. He was alone, and he was vulnerable. It was his neighbor from across the street, Carol, who found him nearly an hour later. Carol was 75, a retired nurse with a vibrant energy and a habit of knowing everything that happened on Elm Street. She'd been a widow for 10 years herself and had a radar for when a neighbor's routine was off. "I just saw that his kitchen light was on in a funny way for the afternoon," she would later recount. "And I hadn't seen him get his mail. It was just a feeling. When I knocked and he didn't answer, I used the spare key he'd given me years ago for emergencies. When I found him on the floor, my first thought wasn't, he needs to be in a home. My first thought was, We need to do something. We. That one small word was the seed. Carol didn't see Arthur as a problem for his distant daughter to solve. She saw him as her neighbor, as part of her community, as part of us. That evening, she brought him a homemade chicken casserole and a bag of frozen peas for his ankle. But she also brought an idea that would change not just Arthur's future, but the future of their entire street. A few days later, Arthur's ankle was still propped up on a pillow, but his spirits were a little higher, thanks mostly to Carol's daily check-ins. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, she called him. "Arthur," she said, her voice full of purpose, "I'm calling an emergency porch meeting. My place, 5 o'clock. Be there." He hobbled across the street to find Carol on her porch swing, a pitcher of iced tea on the wicker table beside her. She had also summoned Frank and Marge from the house next door to hers. Frank, 79, was a retired civil engineer, a quiet, methodical man who was the unofficial handyman of the block. If your screen door was broken or your lawnmower wouldn't start, you called Frank. His wife, Marge, 77, was a retired school librarian and a natural-born organizer. Her garden was immaculate, her holiday decorations were legendary, and her address book was a masterwork of social networking. Carol poured 4 glasses of iced tea and got straight to the point. "All right," she began, looking at each of them in turn. "Arthur's fall scared me, and if we're being honest, it scared all of us. My kids talk to me about downsizing. I'm sure your kids talk to you about it too. We all want to stay in our homes. We all want to keep our independence. But we're also not fools. Things happen. So what's our plan? Are we just going to sit here and wait for the next fall, the next health scare, the next worried phone call from our children? Or are we going to create our own safety net right here?" The 4 of them sat in silence for a moment, the comfortable silence of old neighbors who understood the weight of her words. It was Frank, the engineer, who broke the silence. He pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and grabbed a paper napkin from the table. "Okay," he said, his voice practical. "What are the actual problems we're trying to solve? Let's define the variables." He drew a line down the middle of the napkin. On one side, he wrote risks. On the other, assets. "Risk number 1, Arthur said quietly, is a medical emergency when you're alone, like what happened to me. Risk number 2, Marge added, is isolation, the loneliness. Some days, the only person I talk to is the mailman. That's not healthy. Risk number 3, Carol said, is the small stuff. The daily and weekly chores that get harder, shoveling snow, carrying in heavy groceries, getting on a ladder to clean the gutters. The things that make our kids think we can't manage anymore." Frank nodded, writing it all down. Then he pointed to the other column. "Okay, now, assets. What do we have?" "Well," Marge said, a spark in her eye, "I love to cook and I'm a darn good organizer." "I can fix just about anything that doesn't have a microchip in it," Frank added. "I still drive and I don't mind it," Carol offered. "And I'm good at, well, checking in on people." She smiled at Arthur. Arthur looked at his hands, the hands of a man who had spent his life in a garden. "I can't climb ladders anymore," he said softly, "but I know everything there is to know about keeping roses alive through a hard winter." As they talked, the napkin filled up. It was a simple list of fears and skills, of vulnerabilities and strengths. But it was more than that. Without realizing it, sitting on that porch on a Saturday afternoon, they were drafting the constitution for the Elm Street Independent Living Cooperative. They were turning their street into a village. The plan they devised was simple, based on trust and the kind of neighborly reciprocity that had once been the bedrock of American communities. They didn't need a lawyer or a contract. They just needed a system and a commitment to one another. First, they addressed the emergency issue. They established the morning curtain protocol. Every morning by 9 a.m., each of them would open the main curtain on their front window. It was a simple, silent signal. All is well. If a curtain wasn't open by 9:30, the designated buddy for that day would call. No answer, they'd walk over and knock. Still no answer. They'd use the spare key, which they all now had for each other's homes. It was a system that provided immense peace of mind, not just for them, but for their children who were looped into the plan. Next, they created the Skills Bank. Frank became the official maintenance manager, handling small repairs for everyone. In return, Arthur became the head gardener, advising on and helping with everyone's plants. Marge organized a meal share program. Twice a week, she'd cook a large meal and deliver portions to Arthur and Carol. In exchange, Carol handled Marge and Frank's weekly grocery run using a shared list. They weren't exchanging money. They were exchanging care, skill, and time. Finally, they tackled the biggest and most insidious problem, isolation. They instituted the Sunday porch supper. Every Sunday evening, weather permitting, they would gather on one of their porches for a simple potluck dinner. The rule was simple. Bring a dish if you can, but most importantly, bring yourself. The quiet loneliness that had haunted Arthur's house was replaced by the sound of laughter and conversation echoing across the lawn. Their small group of 4 soon attracted others. The couple from down the street, the retired teacher, the new widow at the end of the block. The Sunday supper became the heartbeat of their new village. 3 months after that first porch meeting, the change on Elm Street was palpable. It wasn't just that the lawns were better kept or that there was more activity on the sidewalks. The very atmosphere of the street had shifted from one of quiet, isolated households to a connected, vibrant community. The silent fear had been replaced by a quiet confidence. The ripple effect was astounding. Arthur, who'd been slowly retreating into himself after Helen's death, was now outside every day, not just in his own garden, but in his neighbors as well. He started a small community vegetable patch in his backyard, and the daily ritual of tending it with Frank and Marge gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He was sleeping better. His daughter Sarah noticed the change in his voice during their calls. It was lighter, more engaged. "Dad," she said one evening, "you sound happy. I haven't heard you sound this happy in years." "I have a job to do, honey," he replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Marge's tomatoes are looking a little anemic. I've got to fix that." The Skills Bank evolved. They created a shared online document which their grandchildren helped set up, listing not just their own skills, but trusted local providers for bigger jobs. Plumbers, electricians, roofers. They could now recommend services to each other with confidence, protecting themselves from being overcharged or taken advantage of. They even started negotiating group rates. "If you give me and my 3 neighbors a discount on snow removal," Frank told a local contractor, "you've got 4 guaranteed clients in one stop." The contractor agreed, but perhaps the most profound transformation was in how they viewed themselves. They were no longer just elderly people, passively waiting for the next stage of life to be decided for them. They were architects, they were founders, they were active, engaged citizens managing their own lives with intention and ingenuity. They had, in essence, co-opted the language of a retirement community, shared services, wellness checks, community dining, and applied it to the homes they already owned and loved. One Sunday evening at their porch supper, as the sun set and the fireflies began to blink in the twilight, Carol raised her glass of iced tea. "I want to make a toast," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "to the Maplewood Meadows of Elm Street, the best retirement village in town, with no entry fee and much better cooking." They all laughed, a warm, genuine sound that floated across the quiet street. They had done more than just create a system to help them age in place. They had rediscovered the fundamental truth of what it means to be a community. It's not about grand institutions or formal programs. It's about the small, daily, intentional acts of showing up for one another. It's about knowing that someone will notice if your curtain isn't open. It's about sharing a meal on a Sunday evening. It's about turning to your neighbor and saying, "We're in this together." The story of Elm Street isn't a fairy tale. It's a blueprint. It's a reminder that the resources we need are often already around us, hidden in plain sight, in the skills of our neighbors, in the trust built over years of shared living, in the simple revolutionary power of a conversation on a porch. So I ask you again, friend, look around your home. Think about your street. Who is your Arthur? Who is your Carol? What skills do you possess that a neighbor might need? What fears do you share that could be lessened by simply talking about them? The choice isn't just between staying home alone or moving to an institution. There is a third option, an option we can build ourselves, an option that allows us to age not with fear, but with dignity, with connection, and with the profound security that comes from knowing you are part of something larger than yourself. You don't have to move to find your village. You can build it right where you are, because you're still here. And your greatest work, the work of building a community that cares, might just be getting started. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, a neighbor, a friend, a family member who believes they're facing this journey alone, please do them a kindness and share this video with them. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is show someone that a different future is possible. And if you believe in the power of community and want more stories that remind us of our own strength, subscribe to Still Here and ring that notification bell. You're not just joining a channel, you're joining a movement of people who know that the best chapters of our lives are still being written together